They said this trail was cleared. No enemies for miles. No traps. No danger. No reason to worry. But war doesn't care about clearance reports. And the jungle? It never forgets. Veteran combat medic Eliza Ray was the last one on patrol, walking the path alone. Her squad had moved ahead, fast, loud, careless. She stayed behind, quiet, listening. That's when she heard it. A sound no one forgets once they've heard it. Not a growl, not a whimper, a gasp, a choking, desperate gasp. She ran through the underbrush, thorns tearing her sleeves, boots sinking into mud, until she saw him, hanging, bleeding, a military working dog, suspended from a crude wire snare, his legs limp, his eyes fading. But he wasn't just any dog. He was from her old unit, one they left behind after a failed mission months ago. They thought he was dead. He wasn't. Not yet. She cut him down with shaking hands. His body hit the dirt, and just before he blacked out, he looked up at her and whispered something no dog should be able to say. Only he wasn't speaking, but she understood every word. And what she did next would make her both a target and a legend. Hi, my amazing friends and family. Welcome back to another story for today. If you are ready to enjoy this heartwarming story, smash the subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. I love seeing all your names and places. Also, don't forget to check out more of our interesting videos on the channel. Now back to the story. She cut him down. The wire coiled like a snake across the dog's blood-matted chest, snapping back into the trees the moment her knife sliced it loose. The military dog, a dark-coated Belgian Malinois, crumpled into the dirt with a sound that didn't sound like pain. It sounded like surrender. Eliza Ray dropped to her knees beside him, hands trembling. His flank rose and fell in short, rapid bursts. His tongue lolled from his jaw. His eyes, glassy with shock, met hers, and blinked. He was still alive. Her brain went into combat mode. Assess. Stabilize. Move. She pulled her med pack forward and unzipped it with her teeth. Her fingers tore through gauze, trauma shears, clotting powder. The dog let out a low groan when she lifted his paw, twisted and cut nearly to the bone where the snare had held tight. She sprinkled the clotting agent directly into the wounds. His body flinched. "Eliza to Bravo team," she said, slapping the comm on her chest. "I've got a downed K9. Repeat, downed military K9. Wounded. Breathing shallow. I need evac. Sending coordinates." No response. Static. Eliza looked around the dense jungle. Too thick for drones. Too far from base. No direct line of sight. The comm was worthless. "Of course," she muttered. The dog tried to lift his head, failed. Instead, he rested his snout against her leg. His tag was still there, though half-charred and caked with dirt. The name stamped into the steel. Ranger. A ghost. Everyone thought this dog had died 6 months ago. "He's gone," the squad had said. "Sniper fire. We heard the yelp." They never found his body, because he was still alive. Eliza's fingers moved faster now, wrapping gauze and medical tape around the bleeding leg, checking his vitals with her fingers against his ribs. There was a faint murmur of a heartbeat, erratic, but still ticking. He was bigger than she remembered, leaner too. He'd been surviving out here all this time, alone, or worse, hunted. That wire trap wasn't random. Not out here, not this close to the ridge. She looked up. The tree line shifted with movement. Nothing visible, but that eerie stillness was louder than sound. No birds, no insects, just the jungle holding its breath. "Someone set that snare for him," she whispered. The dog's ear twitched. He heard it too. Her hands moved on instinct, lifting his limp body across her shoulders, fireman style. Every step she took down the ridge felt like walking through a furnace. Jungle heat, blood dripping down her arm, and a voice in her head that whispered, "They did this on purpose." 10 minutes later, she reached the old ranger outpost, a crumbling stone structure half-eaten by vines and rust, long abandoned, but still familiar. Her team had used it during ops. Hidden cache. Radios. First aid. She kicked the door open and laid Ranger on the table inside. He whimpered once. Then something strange happened. He tried to stand, wobbled, then collapsed again, but not before nudging his paw toward her vest. His claws scratched at the canvas. Tap twice. Tap, tap. Eliza blinked. What are you trying to? Tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Morse code? She froze. 1 tap. Pause. 3 taps. Then 2. B. E. W. She stared at him. No, she whispered. That's impossible. The dog stared back at her, and even through the pain, even through the blood, there was something behind those eyes. Intelligence. Recognition. Fear. Like he was trying to tell her something. A secret. Or a warning. Her heart slammed into her ribs. You're not just any dog, are you? Behind her, a twig snapped. She spun, weapon up, eyes locked on the trees outside the broken window. Nothing. But the air had changed. She wasn't alone. And whatever was out there, it wasn't done with either of them. The silence outside the ranger station was too still. No wind. No birds. Not even the buzz of a single mosquito. Just the pounding of Eliza's heart and the soft, ragged breaths of the dog barely clinging to life on the table behind her. She didn't lower her weapon. She didn't blink. Her body had slipped into survival mode, just like it had on dozens of battlefields before. The kind of stillness that came when you knew, deep in your gut, that you were being watched. A breeze stirred the tree canopy. Leaves rustled. Movement flickered. She stepped toward the window slowly, angling her rifle barrel through a broken pane. Her eyes scanned the brush. Nothing but green shadows and creeping vines. And then, another snap. Closer. Ranger let out a low growl behind her. That's when she saw it. A glint of steel. Buried in the underbrush, half covered in ferns, was another wire trap. Same style. Same tension system. But this one wasn't meant for an animal. It was 6 inches off the ground. At ankle height. She muttered under her breath. Not a poacher. Not a hunter. This was military grade. Someone was setting these with purpose, human purpose. Luring targets. Tracking something. Or someone. She backed away from the window and bolted the door shut with a rusted iron bar. The cabin wouldn't hold off an ambush, but it might buy her 5 minutes if the trap layers were still close. Behind her, Ranger shifted on the table. His breathing was more stable now. Faint, but steady. Eliza pressed a fresh gauze pad into the worst wound, secured it with duct tape, and ran a quick saline line into his flank. Field medicine. Bare bones. But she knew how to keep things alive when no one else could. His eyes fluttered open again. He stared at her. She leaned in close. You tapped something, she said softly. Morse code. That wasn't pain. That was you trying to speak. He blinked once. Then again. 2 slow blinks. The same count as before. Tap. Pause. Tap. 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 D. E. W. She reached for her notepad and scratched the letters down. B. E. W. What did it mean? A name? A warning? A target? She dug through her field pack, pulling out a scratched-up satellite GPS unit. The last coordinates before his tag had gone dark were nearly 50 clicks south of here. Deep in no man's land, she typed in the acronym BEW. The map autofilled, Black Echo Watchpoint. Her blood froze. It was a classified forward outpost. Her unit had passed rumors about it for months. It had gone dark half a year ago. No recovery mission. No press. Just silence. And now a dog from that site had crawled back through hell to find her. Eliza looked down at Ranger. You weren't supposed to survive, she whispered. Were you? Suddenly, a ping. The SAT unit lit up again just for a second. An encrypted file. Then static. Someone was trying to reach her. She clicked it open. Just coordinates. Marked. Red. They were close. Less than a mile away. She pulled her pack onto her shoulders and loaded the sidearm. Ranger stirred, trying to rise. No, stay down, she said firmly. You're not coming. But he growled again. Pulled himself forward an inch. stared at her with fire in his eyes. Whatever had happened to him, whoever had done this, he wasn't done fighting. Neither was she. "You stubborn, impossible beast," she muttered. She wrapped him in a jungle blanket, secured the makeshift stretcher to a pack frame, and tied him in place. Together they moved, one slow step at a time. She didn't know what she'd find at those new coordinates. A trap, a clue, a grave. But she knew one thing. This wasn't just about a wounded dog anymore. It was a trail paved in wire, blood, and silence. And they were going to follow it to the end. The trail was narrow and cruel. Sharp rocks tore at her boots. Vines tangled her ankles. Every few steps, Eliza had to stop and shift Ranger's weight on the stretcher. He didn't whimper, didn't groan. He just stared forward like he knew exactly where they were headed. The air smelled of damp metal and moss, and something else. Burnt oil, gunpowder. The wind carried pieces of the past. Eliza ducked under a low branch and froze as a crumbling outpost came into view. It was barely more than a skeleton now. A broken shell of cinder blocks, cracked antennas, rusted panels half swallowed by jungle. This had been a listening post. Small, quiet. One of the ghost stations set up between larger forward bases. And it had a name, Outpost Redline, which matched the red-marked coordinates sent to her GPS just an hour ago. She crouched by the entrance, eyes scanning for motion, traps, heat signals. Nothing. The air was still. She slipped inside, dragging the stretcher behind her. The interior smelled of mildew and scorched tech. A shattered server rack slumped in one corner. Dried blood stained the concrete floor. Shell casings glinted beneath flickering light. She stepped deeper into the station, and then noticed something. A panel had been pulled from the wall, wires stripped clean, and beneath it, a sealed black capsule. Ranger stirred. She reached for it, heart pounding. The case clicked open. Inside, a data chip, military issued, etched with the insignia of Black Echo. B-E-W, she whispered again. This was what Ranger had tried to warn her about. She slid the chip into her field tablet, overriding security manually. Most of it was corrupted. Audio logs, half-burned photos, encrypted codes. But one video file remained. She pressed play. The screen lit up, static first, then clarity. A man's face, bleeding, exhausted, whispering into the camera. Captain Jared Vance, the last commander of Black Echo. Eliza's breath caught. He'd been declared Kia nearly 8 months ago. "They lied," he whispered in the recording. "We weren't alone out here. It wasn't just a recon op. They set us up, used the dogs to sniff the intel, then pulled out before the sweep came. We found something buried in the cliffs. Biodata, movement logs. But we were too late. They wired the zone before extraction. I think they wanted no one walking out of here alive. If you're seeing this, then Ranger made it." The camera shook violently. Gunfire echoed in the background. "Protect the dog," Vance hissed. "He has the rest. In his chip. Under his collar. He's the last witness. They won't stop. They'll come for him." The feed cut. Eliza sat frozen. Her eyes shifted to Ranger, who lay still, eyes half open, staring straight at her. She knelt and carefully removed the collar. It was thicker than it looked, lined with plating. She felt along the inner band, fingers pressing into the seam. Click. A hidden compartment opened. Inside, a slim silicon memory wafer, no bigger than a matchstick. It had a microseal, blood on the edges. Ranger had been carrying this for months, through enemy lines, across jungle and hell. She had no idea what was on it. But now, she had to protect it. She stashed the chip inside her inner vest pocket, just as Ranger let out a soft warning growl. She turned sharply. Outside. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. She pressed her back to the wall and peered out. 3 men. Black tactical gear. No insignia. One held a tracking device. They were following the dog's signal. Eliza cursed under her breath. She must have activated the subfrequency when she opened the collar. They weren't here to help. They were here to clean up a loose end. She had seconds. She lifted Ranger gently, cradling him in one arm, grabbed her bag, and darted through the back of the ruined outpost. Her boots barely made a sound against the mossy stone as she slid into the trees. Behind her, she heard the glass shatter as the men entered the post. Then, she was here. Check the collar. Signal just cut. She found the chip. She's running. Eliza ran faster, heart pounding. She didn't know who these men were, what agency, what motive, but she knew one thing. Ranger hadn't just survived. He had carried proof, and now she had it. Somewhere deep in this jungle, someone had betrayed their own. Her unit, her command, maybe even her country, and they thought burying it under leaves, wire, and dead dogs would be enough. They were wrong. She would find the truth, because now she wasn't just a medic. She was a witness, and she was done running. The jungle swallowed her whole. Vines snapped behind her as Eliza moved like a shadow, low, fast, silent. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel them closing in. The three men were trained. Silent too. Not regular military. These weren't just soldiers. These were erasers. Cleanup crew. The kind that showed up when someone knew too much. The kind her old unit used to whisper about. Ghost unit, they called them. No patches. No names. Just missions and bodies that disappeared. Eliza ducked under a fallen tree, cradling Ranger tightly. His breathing was shallow. His eyes fluttered but didn't close. He was still holding on. For her. She paused behind a thicket of thick ferns, pressed her back against the mud, and caught her breath. Her ears strained. The jungle was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds were gone. A crack. Boot on bark. They were close. She had to think. Fast. She pulled out her old field map. Dog-eared, rain-stained, but still readable. Just west of her position was an old dry riverbed, carved deep into the terrain, maybe 10 feet down. If she could get there and move upstream under the cover of the bank. Another snap. Closer. She stuffed the map away, shifted Ranger into a tighter hold, and began to crawl, her breath shallow, her heart punching inside her chest. As she slid down the embankment, the world above disappeared behind a curtain of roots and vines. The riverbed was cool, dark, and tight. She moved on instinct, quiet steps, measured pace, and still, something felt off. She slowed, listened, then she saw it. A boot print in the mud. Fresh. Not hers. She wasn't the only one who knew about the riverbed. Before she could turn, a figure dropped behind her. Black mask, rifle raised. Eliza twisted, kicked, drove her elbow into his gut. He grunted but didn't fall. Ranger, weak but alive, growled fiercely. The masked man hesitated, just a flicker, and that was all Eliza needed. She drove her combat knife into his thigh, grabbed his rifle and rolled. Mud flew. Roots snapped. The man screamed and tumbled back up the slope. She didn't wait. She ran. Every step burned. But she didn't stop. Eventually, she found a hollow beneath the old roots of a strangler fig, barely large enough to fit her and Ranger. She slipped in, pulled a mossy branch behind her and went still. The soldier's footsteps returned minutes later. Closer. Then, silence. Ranger whimpered once. A faint noise, barely audible. The footsteps paused. The air stopped moving, and then retreating. He didn't find them. Eliza didn't move until the light began to fade from the canopy. She crawled out just as the sun dipped red behind the trees. Ranger's eyes were still open, but his breathing was getting worse. She had to get somewhere safe. Somewhere with shelter, food, medical gear. Somewhere no one could follow. Her mind searched, digging through memories, maps, rumors. Then she remembered. Fort Eden. Not on any current maps. Buried under layers of old decommissioned codes. A training base turned ghost site. It had been shut down years ago after a botched experiment, but the underground bunker system remained. And it was less than 5 clicks north. Eliza adjusted her pack, lifted Ranger, and began to move. The jungle didn't welcome her. Thorns tore her sleeves. Mosquitoes swarmed. Her boots filled with mud. But she didn't care. She was heading toward answers. The kind you couldn't unlearn. It was nearly midnight when she reached the edge of Fort Eden's ruins. Cracked stone arches. Collapsed towers. Jungle vines swallowing everything. She found the rusted door to the bunker half buried under soil. 3 tries to open it. On the 4th, it groaned like something waking from the dead. Inside, darkness. Cold. Damp. Silent. She lit a flare. Stale air rushed out. But it was safe. She laid Ranger on an old medic's cot, stripped off her jacket, and began working. Cleaning wounds. Injecting antibiotics. Resetting his dislocated shoulder. The dog didn't make a sound. He just watched her. As if saying, "I trust you." When she finally sat down beside him, sweat dripping from her brow, hands shaking, she pulled the chip from her pocket. It was time to see what he had risked everything to carry. She slid it into her hardened tablet and watched as dozens of files lit up. Videos, maps, logs, coordinates. The truth was here. All of it. The betrayal, the setup, the mission gone wrong, and names. Names of those who buried the evidence. And those they left behind, including her own. They had marked her, flagged her. That meant only one thing. This was personal. And it wasn't over. Not even close. The tablet screen glowed cold in Eliza's hands, but the heat in her chest was rising. This wasn't just about a dog. This wasn't just about a botched mission or a ghost unit. This was a kill list, and her name was on it. Ranger stirred beside her, his breathing still labored. She looked at him, the dog she once trained with, once lost, now bleeding and broken beside her. And yet, still protecting her, still warning her, still fighting. The files on the chip were encrypted but labeled well enough. The dates, the names, the call signs, they all traced back to the last mission she and Ranger had been part of. Operation Grave Dust. A recon op that was never supposed to go loud, but it had. Explosions. Screams. Men dragged into trees. And in the confusion, someone on their side gave an order no one expected. Leave the dog. Cut the asset. Fall back. Eliza had heard it through her earpiece. She had screamed in protest. They pulled her out anyway. She never forgave herself. Until now, she thought he was dead. But Ranger had survived. And judging by the shredded scars across his ribs and the way his legs trembled even in rest, he had been hunted every day since. She opened one of the decrypted videos. Helmet cam footage. Ranger. Chained. Surrounded by masked men in a makeshift jungle camp. A voice said, "Still alive. Still useful. Bring him east. The medic will come eventually." Eliza's stomach turned. This wasn't random. They had used him. As bait. A slow, bitter fury built inside her like a storm. She stood up, grabbed the morphine from her med kit, and gave Ranger a small dose to ease the pain. Then she placed her palm gently on his chest. "I'm not leaving you again," she whispered, and he did something that shattered her. He lifted his paw, weak, trembling, and placed it on her arm, just like he used to do in training, just like he did when she was scared. A gesture that said, "I'm still here." She stayed awake through the night, listening for footsteps, for gunfire, for death. But none came, just silence. The kind that means the enemy's not far, just watching, waiting, deciding when to move. By morning, Ranger's breathing was steadier, his eyes clearer, enough for her to try something. "Ranger," she said softly, holding up a laser pointer. He followed the red dot across the floor. That meant his vision was intact. That meant his mind was still sharp. She clicked once, a coded pattern. One long. Two short. He responded. Two short barks. He remembered the old signals. Tears filled her eyes. "You're still a soldier." She spent the next hours printing out files, using the last of the bunker's ancient tech and solar battery packs. Coordinates. Names. Photos. She'd send them off to the few people left she trusted. But first, she had to get Ranger out alive. That meant leaving Fort Eden and crossing a warpath. But she wouldn't go alone. She loaded her gear into a satchel, packed medical supplies, protein packs, and a water filter. Then, for the first time since she cut him down from that trap, she asked the question. "Ranger, can you walk?" He looked at her, then tried. One leg stumbled, the other buckled, but he stood. For 3 seconds, then 5. Then he took a step. Not perfect, but enough. She knelt and pressed her forehead against his. "We'll go together." And they did. Into the jungle, toward the coordinates of an old contact who owed her one. The last whisper Ranger had given her wasn't a word. It was a memory of what loyalty looks like when everyone else runs. What happens next will be written in claw marks and bullet holes. And by the time it ends, the world will know who they left behind. Eliza crouched low beneath the hanging vines, her breath shallow and eyes sharp. Ranger limped at her side, each step leaving a trail of red behind them. The jungle was thick here, trees packed so close together the light barely reached the floor. Every step snapped twigs or crushed brittle leaves, and each sound made her freeze. They had 6 miles to the extraction point. Maybe less if they took the dry streambed. But streambeds were exposed. And after what she just saw back at the trap line, exposure was the last thing she wanted. "Stay with me, big guy," she whispered, steadying Ranger's body with her shoulder. He didn't whine, didn't look at her. His eyes were focused ahead, scanning, always scanning. Every so often, he would pause, ears twitching toward some distant rustle she couldn't hear. His instincts were sharper than ever. Even injured, his body still lived for the mission. And this mission was survival. They kept moving. Around the bend of a fallen tree, across a slope slick with moss. Eliza's boots were soaked, the sweat behind her knees making her uniform cling tight. She'd stopped noticing the cuts on her arms. There were too many to count now. And the pain didn't matter. Not after what they found. Not after what Ranger showed her. But the real shock hadn't even come yet. Half a mile from the extraction point, they heard it. A whistle. One short, one long. A signal. Her blood froze. That whistle had a name. It had a face. It belonged to a man she buried in her past. The same man who once wore the same patch as her. Once called her Doc, like it meant something. Silas Reed. Back when she was deployed 3 years ago, he was part of her recon unit until the ambush in Marawari Valley. He vanished that night, presumed dead. But now his voice came slithering through the trees. "Eliza," he said. Ranger stiffened beside her, letting out a low, broken growl. "You're a hard woman to track," the voice said again, closer now. "But I had a feeling the dog would bring you straight to me." She didn't respond. She only crouched lower, bringing her sidearm into her palm, finger against the trigger guard. Her hands didn't shake. "Not anymore. You know, I could have let you bleed out," Silas continued, stepping into view. He wore black now. Not uniform black, mercenary black. The kind with no insignia. The kind you don't ask questions about. He looked the same, just harder around the eyes. A scar ran from his brow to his cheek. New. Fitting. "You want something," Eliza said. "Want?" He chuckled. "Need. And unfortunately, you're walking around with the only dog who can sniff out the storage drop." Eliza's stomach turned. So that's what this was. Ranger didn't just survive. He escaped with information. Vital information. Which meant they weren't just being hunted. They were the last living evidence. "You know I can't let you take him," she said. Silas tilted his head. "Then you know what comes next." He stepped forward. Eliza didn't hesitate. She fired. The shot caught his shoulder, spinning him off his feet. Ranger lunged. Despite the limp, jaws clamping down on the thigh of one of Silas's backup men emerging from the trees. Everything turned to chaos. Gunfire ripped through branches. Ranger snarled. Eliza rolled behind a log, reloading fast. She counted 4 shooters. 1 down, 3 left, and Silas, bleeding, still crawling toward cover. She could feel it happening, that switch flipping inside her. The one she locked away when she left the military. The one that made her lethal. "Ranger," she whispered. "Guard." The dog hesitated only a second before surging forward. She came out from behind the log, 2 shots sent her mass. Another dropped. The third ran. She moved with a precision that didn't come from thinking. Came from remembering. Silas stood now, barely. Eliza walked straight toward him. He raised his pistol. She shot it out of his hand. He fell again. "You were one of us," she said, standing over him. He smirked through the pain. "So were you." "Not anymore." And with that, she turned. She didn't finish him. Not because she couldn't. Because she didn't have to. She whistled. Ranger limped to her side. Fur slick with blood that wasn't his. They had a mile left. She didn't look back. Because the next chapter wasn't written behind her. It was waiting at the extraction point. Eliza staggered into the clearing, breathless, bloodied, and burning under the weight of everything she'd endured. Ranger slumped beside her, his breathing shallow, foam flecking the edge of his jaw. His coat, once black and gleaming, was now matted with blood and soot. One of his legs dragged limp behind him. But he still moved. He still stayed beside her. Even now, her hand trembled as she yanked the flare from her side pouch. She popped the cap, struck the igniter, and flung it upward. It hissed through the treetops, a trail of red smoke slicing the gray sky. No sound answered. No rotors. No voices. No rescue. Not yet. She dropped to her knees, cradling Ranger's head. His eyes flickered once, then again, slower. "Stay with me," she whispered, fingers running through his fur. "I'm not letting you go. Not here. Not like this." The emergency kit clattered open beside her. She tore through it, lips moving fast, a blur of muscle memory from too many battlefield nights. Syringes, dressings, pressure agents, coagulants. She injected him with a stimulant first, then threaded and 4-line through the thickest vein she could find in his foreleg. Ranger groaned but didn't move. "You're tougher than this," she murmured, her voice cracking. "You're the toughest damn thing I've ever met. And I've met monsters, Ranger. You don't get to die on me." His eyes fluttered, then rolled. Flatline. Eliza didn't scream. She didn't curse. She just moved. Fast. She grabbed the portable defib paddles, lined them up just beneath the damp fur. Hit the charge. The pulse. His body jerked once. Nothing. Again. Once more. Beep. A flicker. Another beep. Then steady. A ragged sob tore from her throat. She bent forward, pressing her forehead to his, her tears sliding into his fur. "You stupid, brave dog," she whispered. "You came looking for me. Now you're stuck with me." The sound of blades cutting through the air reached her ears like a dream. Dust kicked up across the clearing. The grass trembled. Leaves scattered like fleeing ghosts. The bird came down fast. A medevac Blackhawk, doors already sliding open. Eliza didn't wait for help. She lifted Ranger, all dead weight and pain, onto her shoulders like she had 1,000 wounded soldiers before. She stumbled forward. The medic aboard reached for her. "I've got him," she snapped, breath heaving. "Just tell the pilot to fly." They vanished into the belly of the bird. As it lifted, the jungle shrank below. But one thing stayed burned in her eyes. Ranger. Still alive. Still fighting. Still hers. The air in the medevac cabin was thick with antiseptic and adrenaline. Wind thundered outside the hull. Inside, Eliza pressed both hands to Ranger's side, whispering in rhythm with every beep of the monitor. His chest rose slowly. Shallow, but steady. He was still here. They touched down on a military field hospital 45 minutes later. Personnel in full trauma gear rushed to meet them. Gurneys waiting, a vet surgeon already scrubbing in. "Medic Eliza Rowe?" a sergeant called out, approaching as the crew lowered Ranger carefully onto a stretcher. "That's me," she croaked, her throat raw. "Colonel's requesting immediate debrief." But he hesitated. "We understand if you need." "I'll talk," she said, "just not without him being taken care of first." She stood outside the operating bay window, arms wrapped around herself, watching through glass as they worked on Ranger. Tubes, gauze, clamps, blood, so much blood. But the team was fast, surgical. efficient. She caught one of them smile. Good sign. When the vet gave her a brief thumbs up, no words, just a look that meant, he'll pull through, her knees gave out. She didn't fall, but she stopped pretending to stand tall. They led her into a debriefing tent, gave her water, a blanket, and a seat that still felt too cold. Colonel Dyer entered 5 minutes later. His face unreadable, uniform pressed to a degree that looked unreal beside her blood-caked fatigues. "Row," he said quietly. "We read the report from recon, then cross-checked your last radio signal. That extraction point was never in our system. Your distress call pinged nearly 6 miles east of the map grid you were last seen on." She nodded slowly. "He led me there. The dog." "No," she said, her voice sharper than she meant. "The soldier." Colonel Dyer blinked. "The soldier." Eliza stared him down. "That dog wasn't just K9. He was Ranger. His original handler died 3 years ago, deep into deployment. Everyone thought Ranger vanished in action, but he didn't. He ran." The colonel looked stunned. She continued, "He stayed in the jungle, survived traps, fire, predators, but more than that, he searched. Not for his old handler, for someone else. For me." A moment passed, then 2. "That's quite the story," Dyer said at last. She stood slowly. "No, sir. That's the truth." He gave a single nod. "Debrief complete. Take the time you need. You've earned it." Later that night, Eliza walked into the recovery ward. Ranger lay on a raised bed, side-stitched, forhooked, head bandaged. But his eyes opened when he heard her steps. She sat beside him, reached for his paw. "I lied earlier," she whispered. "You didn't just save me. You reminded me who I was before the war chewed me up." He blinked once, slowly. "You were still trying to serve when they left you behind. Still obeying orders. Still protecting people." A tear slid down her cheek. "I don't know how you found me or why, but I know this: you're not alone now. And neither am I." From behind her, one of the nurses stepped in quietly. "Mind if we check vitals?" the nurse asked. Eliza stood. "Of course." As she stepped outside, the stars above were impossibly clear. Cold wind brushed her face. Somewhere out there, Ranger had crossed miles of wilderness, had survived traps meant to kill him, had found her in the one moment she needed saving. And whatever words he'd whispered before passing out, maybe they weren't words at all. Maybe they were a promise. She looked back at the recovery door. Tomorrow would come, and when it did, they'd face it together. 2 weeks passed. The military base buzzed like a hornet's nest again. All routine drills and echoes of boots, as if nothing had ever happened. But for those who had heard the real story, the whispers that passed between medics and handlers, nurses and soldiers, everything had changed. Not because of a mission, not because of a war, but because of a dog, and a woman who refused to let him die. Ranger's recovery was nothing short of a miracle. His wounds were deep, but his will was deeper. Each day Eliza sat by his side. Each day he lifted his head a little higher. Until one morning, the ward nurse opened the door to find him standing beside his bed, tail swaying slow, steady and proud. Eliza's grin nearly split her face. "Guess you're not done yet," she whispered. He licked her hand once and limped out into the sun with her. The base arranged a small ceremony at dusk. Nothing official at first. Just soldiers who had heard what happened. Those who had seen too many heroes forgotten. They gathered in front of the flagpole, boots in lines, caps in hand. Colonel Dyer stood at the front, a single piece of paper in his grip. He cleared his throat. "There are medals for valor, for sacrifice, for service. But there's no medal for what happened in that jungle. No official award for an animal who chose to survive, who chose to come back." His voice caught just slightly. "But I think we can agree that there should be." He nodded toward the edge of the crowd. Eliza stepped forward, dressed in clean fatigues. Her face still held the weight of the fire, the blood, the memory. But in her eyes was something harder to define. Pride, pain, maybe both. Beside her, wearing a special black service vest, was Ranger. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. Every soldier stood a little straighter. Every gaze held just a little longer. Ranger stood perfectly still as Colonel Dyer stepped forward and clipped a medal. Not standard issue, custom-made by one of the base smiths, onto the vest's chest strap. It read, "Valor Beyond Command." The colonel looked at Eliza. "You said he whispered something to you before he collapsed. What was it?" Eliza smiled faintly. "I don't think it was meant for words. But if I had to guess." She glanced down at Ranger. "He said, 'I'm not leaving you behind.'" The silence after was louder than any applause. Ranger barked once. Just once. And it was enough to break whatever dam was holding everyone back. Laughter. Claps. A few tears that didn't try to hide. That night, Eliza sat beside Ranger outside her quarters. The stars spread overhead like 1,000 quiet witnesses. She placed the medal on the wooden bench between them. "Funny," she said softly. "All these years saving lives, and the one who saved mine." Ranger nudged the medal with his nose, then rested his head on her lap. No orders, no uniforms, no war, just a woman and her soldier. One who walked on 2 legs, and one who ran through fire to bring her home. Thank you to my amazing family for staying with me until the end of this story. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this journey, I just know you'll love what comes next. I've prepared something even more exciting and surprising that I can't wait to share with you. Just click on the end card appearing on your screen right now to watch the next one.